This was a kind of a alarming story. A Florida juror this week has been sentenced to 10 days in jail after he overslept and missed the trial. Deandra Somerville of West Palm Beach was impaneled for a civil case in August, but he failed to notify the court when he didn't show up. Well, if he's asleep, how can he notify them? Anyway, Judge John Castronakes held the 21-year-old in criminal contempt and sentenced him to 10 days in jail, 150 hours community service, and a $223 fine. Now, he did appeal against the sentence, arguing it was excessive, and he was released from custody last Sunday, and he appeared in court on Friday. He said, "Now I have a record, and I almost feel like a criminal now, and now I have to explain this in every interview." Now, Somerville was one of the 6 jurors, and it was the first time serving on a jury, and he told local media he slept through his alarm and woke up hours later and realising he had missed the trial. Now, unfortunately, which is partly his fault, he did not call the court to let them know, because he said he felt nervous. And he said he also had to leave for his afternoon job at after-school programmes for the city parks and recreation departments. So, 10 days jail for that. This is the imbalance. You miss jury service and get jailed for 10 days. But you acquire and disperse national secrets and documents, commit perjury and blatant national security issues, and get a slap on the wrist. Hello, Mr. Comey. If this is the way the system is going to work against the people, then we, the people, should boycott the jury service. Jury service is another example of the people running their corrupt system. Non-compliance ends it. If they can't be and act fair in their courts, then why should we facilitate it? No jury, no courts. This is something I would advise all people to do. If you've got a spare few hours or a day, there's a tender court and observe for a few hours the levels of stupidity, unfairness, and outright trampling on people's civil liberties. I can assure you, you will learn much. It boggles the mind. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell described the US economy on Friday as being solid, noting the central bank must do what it can to keep it there. He said, while not everyone fully shares economic opportunities and the economy faces some risks, overall it is, as I like to say, in a good place. I'm glad he thinks that, because nobody else does. And Powell said in prepared remarks delivered at a Fed Listens event. Really? Since when did the Fed listen to anybody? Well, the event was part of a monetary policy communication review by the Fed. Our job is to keep it there as long as possible, he said. While we believe our strategy and tools have been and remain effective, the US economy, like other advanced economies around the world, is facing some longer-term challenges from low growth, low inflation, and low interest rates. Adding, the Fed is examining strategies that will help it achieve its inflation goal of 2%. Is the Marine call-up linked to California or some other major event? Time will tell. Did you know a 1995 CIA and DIA document released told of 20,000 children going missing in the UK each year. 20,000. And 1.1 million children and adults every year in America alone. 900,000 of which are children, from my research and knowledge. Yes, you heard that right. You know, if you ever losing hope that of the funds not arriving, which I can understand, but you must never give up on the children who still to this day go missing at record levels. A lot of it has been scaled back. There's been a lot of arrests, some public, a lot private. But we must never lose sight of those facts, those figures, and those crimes. Final sub-intel before we go into a music break. But this is something that came to my attention, and it covers a lot of what I covered in From Russia with Love 7. And this further adds to it. You know how they always like to take the piss and put things in the movies? Well, here's another one called The Syndrome. And it's a thriller driven by a secret cold from the deep recesses of the Cold War, it was described as. And it is a secret that encompasses an illicit program of human experimentation using pain, drugs and hypnosis to create the perfect assassin. Like I said, they put it all in movies right in our face. So sensitive was this program that only a handful of people have ever been privy to more than a small part of it. The activity's existence was first hinted at by the Rockefeller Commission, there's that group again, in a 1974 report on domestic CIA operations. And the Commission devoted just 2 sentences to that program, whose documentary record had been destroyed, also common, by an outgoing CIA director. Doesn't take much to realise who that was. Now, despite that director's attempt to impose institutional amnesia on the agency he'd headed, 7 boxes of financial documents were later found in a dusty cabinet at the agency's headquarters in Langley, Virginia, and the paper trail continued within those boxes, wound its way through a complex of medical institutes, hospitals, and foundations that had given cover to a behavioural modification program in which human guinea pigs had been tested to destruction without their knowledge or consent. And beyond those 7 boxes, no other records are known to exist. Even so, the New York District Attorney's Office continues to seek homicide indictments against CIA officers who are believed to have murdered a key scientist in the program. Though few records of its existence remain, the program is known to have begun during World War II, when the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, attempted to develop a truth drug in an effort to elicit information from prisoners of war. That was the cover. And the subjects of these earliest experiments were captured by Axis soldiers and American GIs who were facing court-martial for various crimes. Now, when the war came to an end, the program did not. Instead, it is stated it took a strange turn and gained momentum. What had been a search for truth drug morphed into a mind control program whose purpose was to create a murderous automaton whose memory could be edited by his handlers at headquarters. Once you get through stage 3 of the MK Ultra, you no longer know who you are, or your family is, or what you've done, or where you've been. The need for assassination utility of this kind has been articulated a few years earlier by a professor of anthropology at Harvard. No surprise. A former OSS operative who was himself implicated in World War II assassination plots. This was the late Carlton Kuhn, who, in an after-action report to OSS Chief Wild Bill Donovan, wrote, "We cannot be sure that the clear and objective scholars who study the existing social systems and draw up the blueprints for a society to suit our technology will always be heard, or that their plans will be put into operation." And he went on, "We can almost be sure that this will not be the case. Therefore, some other power, some third class of individuals aside from the leaders and the scholars must exist. These are your shell people, the shell corporations, the private security people. And this third class must have the task of thwarting mistakes, in other words, covering up, diagnosing areas of potential world disequilibrium, and nipping the causes of potential disturbances in the bud. There must be a body of men whose task it is to throw out the rotten apples as soon as the first spots of decay appear. In other words, the people who won't go along with it are cast out as rotten apples. And he said a body of this nature must exist undercover. It must be either a power unto itself, which it is, or be given the broadest discretionary powers by the highest human authorities. With the outbreak of the Korean War, Kuhn's proposal seems to have been melded with the truth drug investigations which were then underway and were also given a jump start. Now, the Pentagon and the CIA arranged for the publication of articles about communist brainwashing in popular magazines such as the Reader's Digest and the Saturday Evening Post. And the message was explicit. There was a mind control gap, and this created a groundswell of political support for the agency's decision to embark upon a full-fledged mind control program of its own. Political support for it. Now, it began in 1952. The CIA began to work with the Special Operations Division in the Army's Biological Research Centre at Fort Derrick. Bad place there. Studying the covert use of chemical and biological weapons amongst the drugs studied was LSD, the red pill. For those of you who don't know, all those in queue going, we're red pilling, are talking about MK Ultra mind control programming. Oops. The subject in these experiments were people on the margins of society. They included the inmates of prisons and also mental patients, as well as homeless alcoholics on Skid Row, those who espoused unpopular political views or whose lifestyle was perceived as immoral were also considered what they called fair game. And so they became unwitting guinea pigs in the spook's quest to create the Manchurian Candidate, another movie that told you what they were doing. Now, occasionally it came out in the documents that the agency experimented on its own and sometimes with terrible consequences. Back in 1954, Dr. Frank Olson was invited to a gathering at a CIA retreat near Deep Creek Lake, Maryland, and at that gathering we are told that Olson and 9 other people were given high doses of LSD, the red pill, without their knowledge. And by all accounts, Olson's reaction was negative in the extreme, and he plunged into severe depression, and he suffered hallucinations for days and was taken to see a therapist in New York. While there, and under the most mysterious circumstances, he fell to his death from an upper-story window of the Statler Hotel. Oh my, coincidence or not. Of course, Mr. Olson's death was pronounced as suicide, but apparently the case has been reopened and is now under investigation by the New York District Attorney's Office. Meanwhile, the agency carried on, regardless of killing their own people, but fearful of adverse publicity from incidents such as the one that claimed Olson's life, the CIA shifted many of its operations to the West Coast and also abroad. One such activity involved safe houses in New York and Washington where prostitutes were paid to bring clients in. Fair game, people. The clients would be dosed with drugs and their behaviour observed by CIA operatives sitting behind two-way mirrors. Now, with Olson's death, and these other operations were then moved to San Francisco, where the fallout from such activities could be more easily controlled. Now, still other experiments were funded abroad. Oh my, here we go. McGill University in Montreal, Dr. Ewan Cameron. Oh my. Mr. Cameron is part of the Green Programme and worked with Mengele. Carried out a series of experiments for the CIA, effectively turning his patients into vegetables, and the process, which Cameron calls depatterning, relied upon intensive electroshocks followed by 30 to 60 days of drug-induced sleep to destroy existing patterns of behaviour. In the end, the patient will become tabula rasa, her mind wiped clean and empty, and elsewhere scientists such as Maitland Baldwin agreed to go one step further, volunteering to carry out terminal experiments in sensory deprivation. Patients, subject victims would be buried alive for an indefinite period in stimulus-free boxes, coffins in other words, and in effect they would become the CIA's very own zombies. And behind the code words Bluebird, Blue Chicken, same program, Pandora and Artichoke, the CIA and its sister agencies experimented upon a large and diverse group of subjects, many of whom suffered terribly, using drugs and hypnosis, microwaves and radiation, and the experimenters sought ways to affect moods, impose selective amnesia, create multiple personalities, that's the super soldier program, induce trance states by rapid and remote means, and generate so-called screen memories. This last one involved the creation of false memories as a way of blocking genuine ones. When they come out at the third stage of MKUltra, they're given pictures of their family, which are not their family, they're actually CIA handlers, but their brain has been wiped that much, they don't recognise their own family. And the key plot point in the syndrome, it is also a way to impel an agent to commit suicide when his usefulness is at an end. And the mind control program initiated by the CIA in the 1950s was officially discontinued in the 1960s, which is a complete and utter lie. And many critics of the agency insist that the most promising research continues under other auspices at home and abroad. And this book, The Syndrome, is about that. Bad people doing the most heinous things you can imagine. We'll have more about that 3-letter group later. Right, we're going to have a music break. This song is going out to Matt Schuler, aka Himotep, also known as Jesus' brother, and famous for lying and making a prat of himself with his partner Megan on the Soul Swapped Tolak show. This is for Matt.